or will be in about 10 seconds.
Say that, Cindy.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thanks you folks for being on this call with us. And thanks for all of you who are joining in your socially distant means on the internet. Again, so very sorry we're not here in a Ballard District Council meeting with all of us together in the Sunset Hill Community Center or in the Ballard Library or somewhere here in wonderful Ballard. Just read New York Times says 150,000 new cases of COVID today. So yet another record and yet another very good reminder that we need to be hanging out only on TV together, I guess. So that's the unfortunate reality. Thankfully, it's not as bad a reality here in Seattle and in Ballard as it is in a lot of places because most folks are taking it really seriously and trying to do all they can to be safe. So I guess I won't say more about that than just to encourage everyone to keep doing that as much as possible so that we can try and get past this thing as quickly as possible. Tonight, we're lucky to be having a meeting explicitly focused on issues of public safety here in Ballard. It's obviously been a tremendous year nationally and locally related to issues related to policing and public safety, and lots of concerns about both the issues of crime and concerns for and about homelessness and how it affects our urban area, including right here in Ballard. So we have a great program tonight with a few different folks, and I'm going to hand off to Angie Gerald to basically let her MC the programming in the show and make introductions. So thanks all for joining us. And Angie, why don't you take it away?
Great, thank you, Brent. So prior to introducing our first speakers, I wanted to first acknowledge that in focusing the meeting tonight on public safety, a few things that we wanted to remind people are just that Ballard is a very fast-growing neighborhood, and our population has exceeded kind of all the original growth targets for urban planning in our neighborhood. And that also, compared to most other neighborhoods outside of downtown, we really have a uniquely concentrated set of low barrier services, shelter, and housing. And along with this, there are elevated needs around drug-related crime and behavioral health. So the city currently doesn't really have a locally coordinated or holistic public safety plan at the neighborhood level. And so that's something that we're hoping community members can think about advocating for as we learn about some of the different programs that are active in our neighborhood. The programs that we're presenting today are part of a really pretty complex and very quickly evolving larger system of police reform and public safety and criminal justice reform. So all things to be keeping in mind as we're talking about specific programs. So to begin with, we're going to welcome the Seattle Police Community Service Officer Program, otherwise known as CSOs. And I'll just give a brief background, and then they'll be giving us more details about that. But the community service officers are unarmed civilian officers. They're distinct from the sworn and armed law enforcement personnel who serve with the Seattle Police Department. They have different uniforms, different vehicles, and a complementary scope of work. And Seattle actually used to have a CSO program from the 1980s until 2004, and it was disbanded then due to budget cuts. And then about 5 years or so ago, City Council began working to reinstate the program. And it's taken quite a bit of time with involvement from the Seattle Office of Civil Rights and other groups to really redefine what the program should be for this moment in time. The CSO team presented to Ballard District Council last December, right before they were really launching into the neighborhoods. And so we're really grateful to have them back tonight. And the video from that meeting is still available online. And a lot of the different CSOs joined us and shared information about their backgrounds. It was really wonderful to hear all that they're bringing to the table individually and collectively. So with that, I'm going to introduce Sergeant Nelson. And we gave him a list of different things we're hoping that he'll cover tonight. And then we also have a range of questions that we've gathered from the community. So I think I'll hand off to Sergeant Nelson.
Right, thank you. I want to thank everybody for allowing us to join tonight. It's an honor. So to jump into the list of things I'm going to cover is mostly an overview of where we have come since last December. So we currently have 13 CSOs, that's including the 2 sergeants that are active with the program at this point in time. So a lot of our focus has obviously COVID has thrown a wrench into a lot of the programming, but this group of people are really tremendous and amazing, and they've persevered through all that. And so the overview since that point in time, because what COVID hit, February, March, since that point in time, a lot of the focus has been on COVID-related issues. So a lot of what the group has done was food delivery to those in need, those who are unsheltered, providing food services for the elderly as well in the IDIC and other parts of our community. So that's been a large focus of what they've been doing. The other part of their focus has been to reach out to businesses, and I guess that's basically just the general community outreach and engagement with the businesses and other members of our general community. So to date, they've had about 253 business checks across the city, to include Ballard and Lake City. And I actually also have personally had a couple meetings with people in the Lake City area to try to address and bridge the gap from the services that they feel are maybe not being met. So we've also had contact with about 134 different community organizations from the start of the program, and that number continues to grow as we try to build relationships with other parts of our community. One of the numbers I'm most excited about is, and this is, it's probably not even the most accurate number, but I have about 6,000 community contacts. So we're going to count that as community outreach to include the food delivery. When we see folks in our community, whether unsheltered or otherwise, who don't have a mask, and we are trying to make sure we do that education and distribute masks to that part of our population as well, and try to meet that need if they are not able to actually find masks on their own. Again, that's a number I'm really proud of, and I'm giving a silent golf clap to the three and the rest of the team that are on the call. So to this, one of the questions that I was asked to answer was about the expansion of the program, and to date, there's a hiring freeze right now with the city. So at this point, I don't know if there will be any expansion until after the hiring freeze. And obviously those things are out of our control in terms of what the city and the city council decide to do. So, but I'm proud of the program where it sits right now. Another question is we get often is, are we going to take on a body of the work that the patrol officers are currently doing in our community? So what I like to focus on is trying to make sure that everybody's aware that, again, we do not, and we don't have any intention on taking bodies of work necessarily from patrol. However, there are many social service needs that fall through the gap that patrol officers are stuck with, and the CSOs, and it's been proven to date so far with our program, that we've been able to take a lot of that work and those things where services generally may be missed, and actually provide for our internal and our external partners. And so the example I'm going to give is a really short example, is a situation that actually happened tonight. Now, I won't go into all the detail for privacy. However, two of the CSOs tonight were dealing with a domestic violence survivor. And obviously officers have a lot of work to do on their investigative side, and they called 911, they called the CSOs who were able to come and provide comfort and support to that victim, up to and including hospital support while they were there, and then also providing some additional support to get them to a safe location away from their abuser. So that's just an example of the type of work that they're doing now. Angie, I have a few more things. Am I good to keep going?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. One of the questions is, who works in Ballard? And so CSO Kevin Hendricks is one that frequents the North area. I believe he lives in that community, and he's always was pretty adamant about like trying to services the area in which he lives, and because he wants to obviously be a part of that community, and he lives in that community, and I think he's doing a really great job. So at some point, if you want more information, there are bios that I can get to you, Angie, that you can distribute, and we can also do a SharePoint, or you could like find the link and they can look at their bios. The uniforms, at some point you will pan to what they are currently wearing. The uniform is not very intricate at this point. We wanted to keep it pretty simple, however, very distinctive from what patrol officers look like. So the current uniform consists of a blue polo shirt, either dark blue and or light blue, with community service officer, and their outer exterior is a gray jacket, which has community service officer. It's somewhat reflective for the nighttime. And that as well is something that's very distinctive from patrol. So that request came from community through all the community engagement, which is they wanted the CSOs to actually be distinctive from officers and, one, command a little bit of authority, but actually not be intimidating in a way where it looks like they're carrying out law enforcement activities and duties. So you asked a question about how has COVID and police defunding activism changed the scope or the implementation of our program. And as I explained, our focus shifted and we focused on COVID and the COVID support and education. One of the examples we actually did Friday night lights in the Ballard area, I believe. And that maybe that didn't get out too much, but basically that just consisted when everybody was locked down, the CSOs in CSO vehicles, they made up a bunch of signs and they went around just explaining, with holding signs out the window, offering support to the community and to everybody who was locked inside to stay strong and that, we're here to support them. So that happened sometime, I believe, I don't know when it happened. I did time's all mixed up right now. So the question of the anticipation of what will CSOs be doing in Ballard in 2021, I anticipate that we will be doing a lot more of what we are currently doing, but obviously continuing to build those relationships with your group as well. Now, I do want to apologize because there was obviously COVID threw a wrench and everything, and we have not been able to reconnect the way I thought we would probably connect after that first meeting. But I think that we can push forward and can continue to move forward and really make some progress from here. With that being said, the community engagement, contacting the businesses and bridging the gap between those concerns that the Ballard Business District may have. We're continuing to do that. Assisting individuals in crisis when it's feasible, when it's not a police or an emergent matter. If it's a non-emergent matter, CSOs can get involved in those situations, and they have specific training for situational awareness to not get in over their heads. So nobody can call CSOs for someone running in and out of traffic. That's still a 911 call. However, after the fact, often CSOs can provide service to those individuals as well. So one of the things I wanted to point out is that we have a big focus on youth engagement and youth diversion, and that's one of the things that we have not really been able to get off the ground as much as we wanted to. However, that is to come, and so we're looking to continue to do our outreach and build partnerships with the community to figure out what avenues we can pursue with that. The council member is here. So in terms of there was a question of what is happening in the city council's budget process this fall, and that is well above my pay grade in terms of trying to field a question like that. It's unclear to me, and I know that this is a very different and tough budget year. And all I know is that we are just doing our best to continue with our mission and then support the decisions that the city council and that the city of Seattle's police department have to make. So we're going to do that, and we're going to follow our mission, and we're going to do our jobs. Sorry.
No, you're doing great.
Okay, I'm just trying to. I will say that there has been talk of movement with the CSO program. But just because if someone asks you that question, I don't really have an answer for you as to what that would look like. All I can say is speak personally, and I think that they're doing a great job. I love working with this program, and I love working with this group of individuals, and I hope that that continues to be the case. So they've put forth tremendous effort to get to where we are right now. Okay, so one of the questions, the last question was, how can community members stay informed about the CSO program and interact with the program? And so we do have an email, which is, it's a SPD_CSO info@seattle.gov. And I can provide that to you as well later if someone missed that. However, that's one of the ways that we can be contacted. At this point in time, we are not able to be specifically called through 911. That we haven't ironed that out just yet, but I would anticipate in the future that that will be part of our process, where if someone has a non-emergent police or a non-emergent matter that's social service related, and if it falls into our purview, where the CSO may be able to be specifically dispatched to that. However, there's much to be ironed out there. So I think I went about the 8 or 9 minutes that I said. You may have questions for me or the CSOs, and I'll stand by for those.
That's great. Thank you. Is my audio recorded?
No, I hear you fine.
Okay.
Somebody's feeding back a little bit. You might make sure if anyone has on the YouTube on that they have that at least muted.
Okay.
And if you're not speaking, good to mute yourself while you're not speaking.
Great.
Go ahead with.
So I was thinking the next step, which would be wonderful, is to have the other CSOs who are present here tonight, if you don't mind all introducing yourselves and maybe just give a really brief statement about what drew you to the program or how long you've been working as a CSO.
Okay. I'll start. My name is Kevin Hendricks. As Sergeant Nelson mentioned before, I live in North Seattle, so I also work in that area. What drove me to be a CSO is that I have a background in mental health, and I've always wanted to help people, and especially those who basically can't help themselves. And we have a large unsheltered population right now who don't know the resources that are available to them. So a lot of what I do throughout the day is when I see someone on the streets unsheltered, I let them know about the programs that are available to them, things that they can do to where they don't have to be out there, places they can go and get a meal, because a lot of people just don't know. So back to what I was saying, when I started this job, when I saw it online, I was like, that's something that's perfect for me. I've always strived to do my best throughout my life, and just trying to help those in need. And I just like doing this job. I really do.
Thank
So
you.
Kevin, well, I'll wait on questions. I'll let you.
Oh, no, go ahead. Oh, go ahead. I'm here for questions.
I was just going to ask you kind of how you're doing that. Are you walking kind of a beat, or are you like, how do you interface with, I don't know if you call them clients, but folks who can utilize your information, or maybe you can kind of help them get onto something that they need?
We are all assigned a vehicle. We all have electric vehicles that we drive around. And for the most part, I drive around for most of the day, but when I'm in an environment where there's just a lot of people out and about, I usually walk. Like in the Ballard area, I usually walk up and down Market Street, or wherever. If I'm in another area of the city, I'm out on foot. So usually when I'm out and about, many times I don't have to approach individuals. They will approach me, because a lot of people are in need of help right now. And they will approach me and ask questions, and I'll just answer the questions. And usually the questions that they have involve resources about how they can get different things throughout the city. A lot of people are hungry out there, and we're helping out. Like Sergeant Nelson said, we deliver a lot of food throughout the city. We provide a lot of services right now, much needed services.
Perfect.
Thank you. And who else is there with you?
Hi, everyone. I'm Cindy, one of the CSOs. We met. I was one of the first 5 that was hired, so we met on our very first meeting. I actually came from union organizing with SEAU Healthcare, so I did a lot of hospitals up here in Seattle. I was born and raised in West Seattle and kind of hung out in South Seattle a lot. And I actually was a huge recipient of the services that the city of Seattle has provided. I was homeless myself. I had a kid. Now I'm organizing and providing social services to union workers, and that wasn't enough for me. So when I was looking for a career change, this came up, and I said, oh my gosh, that job is made for me. I need to be out in the streets offering services to people who don't know about services. And so that's what drew me here. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's it.
Hello, it's Margito, one of the CSO. I started in February this year. And the reason I wanted to do this job is I know the community needed someone who bridge the SPD and the community. I see myself as a bridge. I also speak 2 other languages beside English. And within the CSO, we speak 8 languages. So we're here only not to provide services, to navigate or show different culture, how diverse the city of Seattle is. And recent call that I can share with you, they did call for someone who speak my language in South Seattle. Me and Cindy, Kevin, 3 of us in the evening went out there, not only interpreting, but we found shelter and assist someone. That's why I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, one other thing that I didn't mention about the program, since being hired, we've all been well trained. We're trained in landlord-tenant disputes, adult protective services, child protective services, mediation, conflict resolution. So we're well equipped to be out on the streets helping these people.
Thank you. So we've got some other questions that came in from the community, and I'll let you guys decide who wants to jump in and answer them. But one of the first ones was, where are the CSOs dispatched from? Are you based out of precinct buildings or other city locations?
We are all based out of Seattle headquarters in downtown.
Okay.
Like for instance, our shift, the 3 of us here, is from 10 a.m. until 8 p.m. But like I mentioned earlier, I'm assigned to north. Margito behind me is assigned to the south end, and Cindy is assigned to west. So once we get here, we get briefed on the day, and we all go our own separate directions.
Thank you. And then, so Ballard has some of the slowest 911 response times in the city. And we were wondering, is there any priority placed on having CSOs more available for population centers like ours that don't have the more immediate Seattle police response times? Is that a part of the planning at all?
Yeah, as of right now, you ready, Sarge? You got that? There are 2 of us who are assigned to North Seattle, myself and Vicky. North Seattle is a large area, so we basically share this area. And out of a 7-day week, one of us is in the north every day. So you will have one CSO present every day in the north.
And Angela, can I jump in and answer part of that question as well? So again, we have to follow the guide of our leadership. And at this point in time, you know, our response to 911 calls is directly tied to like the requests of like a 911 of a police officer at this point. So again, we're not necessarily being directly dispatched by the 911 operator for any police or non-police like call. In the future, you know, maybe should the program expand or something like that, there could be some possibilities for that. But we also take reports every day from people in the community, the Ballard community, the Lake City community, and those business owners and those citizens. They give us specific and direct concerns that they have. Each CSO writes up that concern, and then they give that concern directly to me. I then take that concern and I forward that through the chain of command, and that goes to like whether it be the precinct commander or like whatever follow-up unit and or internal or external partner we feel should best handle the issue. That's our current system right now. But I do hope that, I know that it's tough right now, but I can assure you that we really are working hard to try to figure out how to pick up the gaps to reduce 911 call times.
Sergeant Nelson, is there a sense that there be a phone number or some way to reach you kind of more immediately it seems like people are going to be making 911 calls, but a lot of the need is to sort of redirect only really serious emergency calls to 911, where a fair amount of things could go to you if it could get dispatched in a way. Is there a vision of how to get you into more an immediate kind of dispatch role?
Yes, we currently are in the process of working with our 911 dispatch, but obviously our 911 dispatch is going to be changing as well. So there's just a lot of things in flux and a lot of things that we have to, we're like everyone else, we're rolling with the punches, and we have meetings that get scheduled and meetings that get canceled, and we have things that happen in our community that just really to be totally honest with you, sidetrack us for weeks and sometimes even up to a month or so. And one of those things is just that whole process, because we've had meetings with 911 and the commander there. It's just that we've been derailed numerous different times because of things that have happened, whether it be COVID related or the unrest at different points in time that have kind of happened in the community.
So I was curious to ask, you mentioned that I think there's 13 people on staff right now, and that there's currently a hiring freeze for the Seattle Police Department. And so is the CSO program is considered under that that hiring freeze currently? Yeah,
we are. The CSO program is under the Seattle Police Department, and at this point in time, we are not making or advertising any openings for the CSO position.
Okay, and you are the only sworn officer who works for the program. All the other staff are civilians. Is that right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So my function is, I'm essentially their tie to get the issues from the community into the police department. So it's working pretty well in my opinion. It's just, just time. We're trying to give it some more time and work out some of the kinks.
I was curious to ask the other CSOs on the call. I know that's a very political question and don't want to put anyone on the spot, but there's so much talk about moving things out of the Seattle Police Department, like with 911 staffing and parking enforcement. And I was just curious about perspectives about why it may or may not be important for CSOs to remain within the police department structure or be within a new, department structure. If anyone has just perspectives to offer on that, it doesn't have to be a strong personal opinion, but just what's some of the feedback you hear from community, or how does it affect kind of just the functional roles that you're playing in your job right now?
Can I ask Cindy to take that one? Okay.
Sure thing. So I'm sorry, can you repeat the question one more time?
Yeah, sorry, I went on a little bit long, but there's so much talk about, defunding police, restructuring how police services are handled in Seattle. And I was wondering how it impacts kind of just the basic functionality of your job. What are some perspectives on whether the CSO program were to remain within the police department structure or become part of a new department? It would be interesting to hear perspectives from people who are out there doing the work right now. Would that make some things harder, easier? Do you hear feedback from the community like, oh, we wish, you weren't associated with them at all? Or is it a helpful bridge, as some of you were mentioning earlier?
Right. So, so we get that question a lot too, that we shouldn't be in the police department. Why is the police department doing this? The police department are bad people. We're not. And we've had this debate amongst our team as well. And a lot of us actually would have never applied for this position if it wasn't within the police department. We've all had our experiences, both good and bad, with police run-ins, but we actually want it to be that change, the way that the position was posed and how the structure is going to be done is that we are going to be bridging the gap between communities, because we are the prodigies of what has happened within the system, and we are going to be that group who will make that change. And it is just time, just like Sergeant Nelson has said too, it is just time. And the fact that COVID right now is making things a little harder, so we would have to deal with things a little bit differently. A lot of us come from very different backgrounds, and you can sit at a table all day and talk about it, but it only looks better if you're out there, and that's exactly what we're doing. So, you know, it's both good and bad. That's what I can tell you, the feedback that we've gotten, but we are not discouraged. We don't, I guess we don't want to move to the Department of Neighborhoods was the last thing that was put out. We really would like to stay with the department. But again, that's out of our hands, and we hope the community knows that we're there to service them no matter what. But it's internally, we would not be here if it weren't to be in the police department.
Thank
I hope
you.
that answers your question.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see. One of the other questions that came in relates to the next speaker that we have tonight. Do you collaborate with LEAD caseworkers and other outreach organizations?
Yes, we do. We're making those connections. One of the LEAD caseworkers that we're currently working with I'm in the West Precinct area, so it's the Chinatown International District. One of the LEAD caseworkers is Jessica. So we have a lot of interactions with her, trying to get folks out of encampments and get into services. That's my experience. I know that possibly Murgitu has worked with her a lot as well. So if you want to give some examples, Murgitu, on how you've worked in your area with REACH.
We have worked with REACH program and LEAD program and neighborhood house, other social service providers in the area to work together how we can better serve our community.
Thank you.
Well, we should probably jump, speaking of LEAD.
We probably should.
Our next agenda.
Yeah, I feel like I need to comment. I can't believe that there's only 2 CSOs covering the entire North Precinct, because I think that's 40% of the city's population. So you guys are amazing.
Thank you.
And I'm curious to see, we can, ask Councilmember Strauss later in the meeting about what kind of the prospects look like for the next year or two of funding and what the scope of the program might be looking like in the near future. But the needs seem immense out there, and just to be visible and accessible within communities seems like a big challenge with that amount of staffing and everything that's going on in Seattle. So thank you for the work that you do very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your support.
And we so appreciate all the work that you're doing for our city. Thank you so much.
So I think we'll transition over to the LEAD program. And I know that some of you probably need to get back to work, and anyone, Sergeant Nelson or anyone who is available to hang out, there might be questions that come up later where they'll refer back, but we completely understand if anyone needs to bow out from the CSO program. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, you all.
So next up, we are going to transition over to a presentation and update on the LEAD program, which has up until recently been known as the Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion Program. And I understand there's been a bit of a name transition, and I'll let our speaker get into that. The name and scope of the program has been shifting in response to all the challenges this year, which we've been talking about: the pandemic, the ongoing homelessness crisis, the drug epidemic that's continuing, and then also concurrent with the really strong activism asking for substantive changes to our criminal justice and policing systems. So LEAD is a nationally recognized arrest diversion program that started in 2011 in downtown Seattle, and forms of it are active in a variety of different cities around the nation now. LEAD was traditionally focused on low-level drug-related crime and prostitution, and has a very strong social justice lens. LEAD was expanded to Ballard and other parts of Seattle's North Precinct in summer 2018, and it continues to expand to other parts of the city. I think West Seattle is a recent addition to that. So tonight we have Tracy Gillespie, their operations director, here to speak to us. And Tracy, do you want me to quickly recap some of the bullets we asked you to talk about, or are you comfortable just kind of jumping in?
I can jump in, and if I missed something, Angie, will you just flag it for me?
Gotcha.
I'll be sure to leave some time to make sure I cover questions.
Thank you.
Okay, sure. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Like Angie said, my name is Tracy Gillespie. I'm the operations director for the LEAD program in Seattle, King County. I also currently project manage the North Precinct's LEAD program. So it's always nice to be back in a Ballard meeting. It's been a little while. So I'm glad to be here to give an update. So LEAD is the Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion Program / Let Everyone Advance with Dignity. So we still are known as the Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion Program, but we wanted to expand our names so that it better encompassed the future growth of where our program is going. For those of you, I'm sure that most of you are familiar with our program, but just in case there are a few of you who have logged in tonight who are not familiar, LEAD is a public safety program that utilizes social services and care coordination in order to stabilize individuals with behavioral health conditions and reduce their amount of law violations and chronic law enforcement contacts. So we work with individuals who are impacted by mental illness, by drug use disorder, by homelessness, by trauma and extreme poverty, especially when those conditions are leading to chronic law violations or chronic police contacts. The theory is that if we can intervene and provide the services that those individuals need, that their law violations will decrease. While, so we are that crux of both a social service intervention and also a public safety program. So we partner with law enforcement, we partner with the prosecutor's office, both within the city and the county, and we really develop a whole encompassing wraparound approach in order to both simultaneously stabilize our participants while making sure that we're reaching our benchmark of reducing their law violations and making the community safer. So within 2020, obviously we are all been impacted by the pandemic, but I did want to give a brief overview of where we're at with our stats, because I think people are always interested in our metrics and our outcomes and our numbers. So at the end of the first quarter, we had 620 active participants. 31 of those individuals began mental health treatment. 107 began substance use disorder treatment. 60 obtained shelter, and 23 obtained permanent housing. By the end of the second quarter, we had 626 active LEAD participants. 22 began mental health treatment. 93 began substance use disorder treatment or care coordination. 37 obtained shelter placement, and 44 obtained permanent housing. And just at the end of our third quarter, we wrapped up with 637 active participants, 45 of which began mental health services or treatment. 178 began substance use disorder services. 88 actually obtained shelter, and 38 obtained permanent housing. So we have been really working with an uphill battle with all of the closures of services and the slowdown that the entire world is going through. The social service world was definitely not immune to that. But despite that, our case management team has really been just excelling in all of the outcomes and the services and the care coordination that they have providing with our participants. So our 2020 operations have very much continued. Our LEAD case managers are still out providing street outreach. They're meeting with participants. They are working with law enforcement. They're working with our prosecutors in order to continue the program. We did have to obviously make some adjustments in order to accommodate, I think, the growing challenges that 2020 has really thrown at us. So one of them being the impact of COVID. You know, jails have, they were mass releasing people. They were not accepting a lot of certain crimes. Courts shut down for several months. Our law enforcement were dispatched and obviously had to alter the way that they could do their service provision at the beginning of the pandemic. And so all of those really flagged the urgency for us to adjust our service provision. So at the very beginning of the pandemic, we actually expanded the lead services to include the public safety and public health recommendations of the COVID response in order to encourage our participants to shelter in place. So we have been utilizing motel placements in order to marriage the public safety mission that LEAD has always been known for with also the public health risks. So while our case managers are doing all of the things that they used to do in terms of service provision, we are also adding onto all of our typical service provision with motel placements in order to make sure that we are also adhering to and supporting our participants with sheltering in place and social distancing and making sure that COVID response is really embedded in our service provision. We also, obviously, one of our main partners, our law enforcement partners with Seattle Police Department, have been greatly reduced in their capacity between the protests and then with the changes within their departments of redeploying a lot of their units that we used to work very closely with back to patrol. So we have had to make some operational adjustments. We also did want to take very seriously the community concerns and the outcry regarding really reassessing and embracing this moment of reassessing law enforcement and what we are asking law enforcement to do within our communities. So in order to be responsive and continue our operations, we actually expanded our referral process so that the Public Association, the organization that I work for, has now become an approving entity for community referrals. So that means that any referral that comes from community members, such as yourself, that can both be approved by law enforcement, by Seattle Police Department, but it can also be approved by my agency as well. This can really expand our ability to be extremely responsive to the community, while also taking equitability into consideration into our operational processes. How we've seen this pan out in a couple of our neighborhoods is we've had some businesses and community members actually call our teams directly rather than relying on 911 in moments where that was appropriate. So if there was an individual who clearly had a behavioral health condition and they were engaging in behaviors that were problematic, that were causing public disorder, and maybe they were engaging in some low-level criminal activity, whether that be theft or trespass, but it most certainly was not a moment of severe danger in that moment. A lot of those businesses and community members chose to call us to get an immediate response for a lead referral in lieu of a typical 911 law enforcement response. And we've seen that those operational changes have been very successful. And so we're hoping to continue to develop avenues that would encourage that within our community responsiveness. So for 2021, in terms of our funding, we actually are funded at the same level that we were funded for 2020. So we do have several hundred case management slots that we are very excited about expanding and continuing to serve more participants and engage and accept more referrals. As of right now, we are working closely with the mayor's office to really identify where those priority areas, neighborhoods, and behaviors and participants are going to be. So that is still a little unclear. I'm not sure if Ballard is going to be one of those neighborhoods or really where the prioritization is going to come into play. So I don't have a lot of clarity around that, but we are working closely with the mayor's office in order to figure out where is the best place and the highest priority for lead services and for the lead response to be implemented. We also, so I think one of the questions was, how can people stay engaged? And I love this question. And it's always embarrassing because our technological skills are definitely further behind our social service skills and a lot of the other things that we have strengths. But we are creating a new website that I think is going to be, I'm hoping will be very interesting to a lot of the community members that are interested. We are going to be posting outcomes and programmatic updates, and I think all of the information that people are really interested in getting in real time. So that should be launching within the next few months. We also are launching a new database in which it will really smooth and hopefully expedite the community referral process as well. So I will be sharing out a link for community members, including all of you lovely people, in case you have a referral or someone, an individual that you have in mind that you think would be a good lead referral. You can quickly fill out a form and we will get that immediately and start processing that referral. I think I want to keep an eye on time and make sure I have enough time for questions. Angie, did I miss anything on your first list?
You're doing a pretty great job moving through it.
Okay, good.
And we have lots of questions. So
wonderful.
Yeah.
I figured we would.
Is there anything else you wanted to recap first before I jump in, or?
No, let's go ahead and jump into questions.
Okay, that was a great overview. Thank you very much. Actually, first, I just wanted to double check. I'm not sure if I heard correctly. Did you say that you are able to hire several hundred people in the coming year? I think I misheard.
Oh, not hire. That's a case management participant slot.
Okay.
We have hired,
new clients.
Hired quite a few new case managers, and specifically in the North Precinct, I think we are up to 13, possibly 14 case managers specifically for the North Precinct.
Okay.
We do not have case managers that are designated specifically to neighborhoods. So we don't have case managers that are specific to Ballard. We like to do a best match with our case managers. So participants' needs and strengths and identity all play into how we match a participant with a case manager. So they do tend to float around between neighborhoods. But we are most certainly growing our staff so that we can continue to accept referrals and meet with participants and continue to expand throughout neighborhoods.
So you have 13 or 14 staff members in the North Precinct, and do you know about how many citywide?
About citywide, I believe we have over 40 at this point. I'll have to double check.
So it's quite a bit bigger than the community service officer program, though. That's interesting.
Yes, we have been very fortunate to be able to expand this year. Yes.
Yeah. One of the first questions was, are the caseworkers ever visually identifiable when they are working, or are they always kind of plain clothes, unmarked vehicles? Like, would the community ever know if they're seeing a lead caseworker?
It's a great question. We do have lead gear. So we have some lead case managers who will wear badges that will have a lead badge. We have lead jackets and windbreakers and other types of items that could identify a case manager as a lead case manager. It's most certainly not mandated. Typically, the case managers make a judgment call for when they are wearing their gear and when they really need to be visually identifiable and when that's appropriate. And there are other circumstances in where that would not necessarily be the most appropriate or necessarily the safest. So there are moments where you will be able to identify a lead case manager just by them having a lead jacket on, and there's going to be, but the overall majority of the times you likely will not be able to identify them just by what they are wearing. And that's typically on purpose. I think that what I would like to do though is have a couple of our screening and outreach coordinators, at least by face, really be familiar with a lot of the community members. And so I think that, what I could do, Angie, is actually invite our screening and outreach coordinators to a future Ballard district meeting, so that at least you have a face to name. Because I think that would be a really nice go-to people for folks to know.
Yeah, we'll come up on that topic a little bit more later in the meeting too. We're just one organization. We do our best to kind of reach broadly around the greater Ballard area and tie into other organizations. But the idea of being known in the community obviously means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And by no means, if you appear here, does all of Ballard, unfortunately, know that you exist and who you are. And so one of our questions, which we'll be bringing up with Councilmember Strauss also, is how are all of these different programs, scalable and visible and accessible to the public at large? Whether you're online or tuning into these topics, how would people know about you? So I realize that might not be something you can answer right now, but I think it's a tough question that Seattle really needs to focus on.
No, absolutely. And I think an important distinction is obviously our case managers they're the heart of our program. I mean, they're really just incredible humans. They're doing incredible work. And I think that there are definitely times where community members, businesses will know by name our case managers. But ideally, myself and my coworkers and team at the Public Defender Association would really be the first line of contact for community members. It is my job to be responsive to community members, to be present in meetings, to be really in touch with what is happening within the neighborhoods to make sure that our program is being responsive. So if community members have any questions or if they're wanting to know who to get in touch with, please contact me. I will make sure that folks have my contact information.
One of the other questions that comes up a lot are, you had mentioned people always ask you about data, about outcomes and metrics. The information that you provided was really all oriented around the social services side of what LEAD does. So who has, connected up with behavioral health services or shelter or housing. How can the community find out more about law violations data, or how the clientele within LEAD are doing in terms of their impact on the community and their ability to lead more, safe and legal lives?
Right. I mean, that's a great question, to be honest. And all of that information really lives within the city. Our partners, operational partners, are with the city of Seattle. We work with the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office, the Seattle City's Attorney's Office, obviously, with Seattle Police Department, with the King County Sheriff's Office. And so it is extremely difficult for us to be able to get information that does not live within one of our contracted agencies. It's very easier for me to be able to provide numbers based on the social services and those outcome-based, because those outcome-based metrics, because of the contractual relationship. But I think that the interest in seeing how our clients' law violations and their court filings and the number of arrests, all of that is, I think, very interesting information. And I think that if folks are interested in getting it, we should definitely ask the city. I think that would be wonderful information to provide, and that they would most certainly have it and would have the easiest way of accessing it and making that shareable.
Yeah, we'll bring that up with Councilmember Strauss later in the meeting also, because if it's, continually presented as a public safety program, I just think it's important for the city to understand and present to the community, how is the funding leading to public safety improvements? How are we measuring that? What does that mean? And for things that are public, like arrest data, I guess I'm not sure why that would be a difficult thing.
Right. No, absolutely. And I think just one point, or just kind of a consideration for, particularly in the context of 2020 and what we were experiencing with COVID, is obviously the limitations that we are seeing with law enforcement and their ability to respond to a lot of crime. Sometimes those types of metrics don't necessarily capture the actual reality of what's happening in neighborhoods. I think there are plenty of people on this call that know that they have dialed 911 and they were not able to get a response because it wasn't deemed priority one. Or we've seen just kind of the cycle of the traditional criminal justice and legal system. And so with those types of restraints that are going on right now within COVID, sometimes, court-based or arrest-based information isn't necessarily reflective of what is happening in a community. And so I think for what, I would try and do with LEAD, and what we are trying to do is really be responsive to the felt public safety of neighborhoods and make sure that we are actually being responsive outside of, I think, the traditional arrests and court filings and those types of metrics, is really making sure that we are having an actual felt neighborhood impact.
That would be great. Ballard's not experiencing that. So that, yeah.
It's so helpful that you sort of characterize it that way, I think, Tracy. I mean, a felt experience is sort of tactile and not necessarily statistical, but it's sort of one that we can all identify with at some levels. Like, does it seem like it's making a difference? Hearing you name the numbers of folks you've been able to find permanent shelter for in the past year by quarter, and then thinking about that number and how it reflects maybe only 1 or optimistically 2% of the recent homeless count that we have, is like, boy, that's just really nibbling away at the margin. Sure. Yeah. And if there's a lot of recidivism, then it's essentially doing nothing. So is there a plan to sort of grow the program, or is there a vision that you can start working more closely with the next version of police? How's it going politically that we might, because we're talking about doing a lot more social work and a lot less policing as a form of policing now. So it's going to have to be a much expanded effort if it's going to do anything.
You're absolutely right. I mean, yeah, Brent, you're absolutely right. Part of the tipping points of having a felt experience in the neighborhood, whether we have had full saturation in that neighborhood and have actually done everything that we can do as a program, and also just globally within social service provision. And I can absolutely say to you that we just have not reached that. And so the plan for continued growth and the plan for how we reach that tipping point, to be honest, I'm still unclear about. So, we did get refunded at the same level that we did in 2020 for 21. That is a huge accomplishment given the current funding limitations that I think a lot of other programs are facing at the moment. But I do think that there does have to be a plan for what is going to be the future growth, and how do we reach that tipping point of actually saturating a neighborhood where that felt experience is agreed upon and actually experienced by the community members.
Brent, I'd love to get through just a few more questions before we transition. Is that all right?
Well, we're running very short on time.
Okay.
So I'm going to say no, but we can have one more question.
Okay. Who does LEAD report to in the city government, and what are some of the requirements you have to fulfill for the program's funding? And that would be around public safety.
It's a great question. As of right now for 2020, we report to HSD, so the Human Services Division. We will see what changes happen for 2021. And our reporting metrics are pretty similar to the metrics that I had listed out. So we report on the number of referrals, the number of active participants, what our caseloads look like, how many case managers we have employed, what are the social service outcomes and metrics that are associated with the program. We also report out on any important programmatic neighborhood updates. And so that's typically encompassing what we're reporting specifically to the city.
So there isn't really any public safety leadership that's overseeing the program and looking at public safety outcomes. It's really funded still more just through Human Services?
Correct. Yeah. For this year, we were still within the Human Services.
Okay. All right. Well, I have lots more questions, but I think sounds like I need to hand back to Brent.
Yeah, well, I think we need to continue with the program. We've packed it densely tight, and it's certainly super riveting responses to super compelling questions. So we'll keep trying to do this. There's no reason we can't revisit some of these topics with some of the same of you. And Tracy, really appreciate your time and energy and thoughtfulness.
Yeah, appreciate being here. Thank you so much.
I think we're going to quickly hop over to Jody Grage, member of the Ballard Community Task Force for Homelessness and Hunger and a longtime executive committee member of the Ballard District Council, to talk a little bit about that. And Jody, I'm hoping you can hit it and quit it in like 4 or 5 minutes so that we can jump over to Dan and talk a little bit about some of the bigger political council endeavors around some of these issues. You're muted, by the way, before you get too far into that sentence. I don't know if I can unmute you. Let me see if I can. Nope.
Okay, I'm unmuted now. Okay.
There you go.
I am going to read this because the Ballard Community Task Force on Homelessness and Hunger planning team wordsmithed it, and I think I should respect that. The Ballard Community Task Force on Homelessness and Hunger is very concerned about public safety for everyone in Ballard and beyond. We understand that both those who are unhoused and those who are housed are not a homogeneous group. Yes, some of the homeless are criminals, substance abusers, and or have mental or behavioral health issues, but these problems exist among the housed as well. And if the housed are at risk, the unhoused are at greater risk. That said, it is worth noting that authorized encampments, tiny house villages, and shelters provide security both for residents and for the surrounding community. These often include 24/7 staff or locked gates during unstaffed hours and with a phone number that neighbors can call. In addition, programs are in place to benefit the neighborhood community, such as scheduled litter pickup and reporting of suspicious behavior to the police. I have, as an example, a report from Tent City 3, which is at 85th and 14th at the Trinity United Methodist Church. The residents provide security at the encampment 24/7. Neighbors can call the camp security at 206-399-0412. Residents do regular litter pickup in the neighborhood, and if they see something suspicious, they will report it to the police. So far, there have been no concerns about security in the neighborhood at their new location on 85th and 14th. They could use some plywood sheeting to go underneath their tents. I have reports on other areas too. If you have concerns about what the provisions are, you are encouraged to contact BICSA. You can call me at 206-718-1529. The entire world has my phone number. And I'll work with BICSA to answer your questions. What we'd like you to know is that the encampments also have security procedures internally and also for the surrounding areas. Because as we work to get more unhoused people farther along the road to being housed, it's important that the people who are within that system, as well as the neighbors, know that this is that there are processes put in place to make this work for everyone. So we encourage you to contact me, to contact BICSA if you have problems and concerns, and we are more than happy to work with the CSOs, with the LEAD program, with everybody and anyone. We have a lot of resources, both as far as things and as far as people to help. So we encourage everyone to put us at work, and let's keep everyone in Ballard safe. How is that for Speedy?
Faster than I could even unmute my mic there. So very good, Jody. Thank you. Appreciate
All right, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I'm really grateful that a very busy man during the budget season was able to give us an hour and a half his time. I think I owe him about 3 beers now, not just one, for 3 half hours that he gave us tonight, and 3 prior meetings in the past year, I believe, too. So Dan, thank you very much. Happy to welcome Councilmember Dan Strauss, District 6, to the conversation here. Dan, I think I'm going to mostly try and pepper you with some thoughtful questions that folks from the community have provided about kind of public safety issues and crime and policing and homelessness issues. I think I want to sort of start at the outset just by observing what an interesting and complicated kind of mix the issues that we've been talking about here in the past hour really are, in terms of this sort of phrase public safety is not a very easily defined one. It's pretty slippery, I think. I mean, a lot of what we've been talking about is sort of public safety in the nature of sort of basic property crime and kind of basic personal nuisance crimes and crimes that get maybe a little more significant than that. Talking about issues of homelessness and living in, you know, great states of poverty, which sometimes relate to having folks who are without housing kind of perpetrating crime, but certainly they can tell you they're also finding crime perpetrated against them at greater frequency than folks who are housed like us, a lot of them. And then there's this whole question of, you know, mental health issues. And so there's this gigantic, you know, chart of bubbles that are overlapping in different ways. Some of them 2, some of them 3. I'm going to try with my questions, I guess, initially to try and focus on what are more sort of truly public safety questions than on kind of more questions about homelessness, occupation of Ballard Commons Park, some of those questions. But because they so overlap, you know, I'm going to encourage you to think about your answers and how you want to talk to us about that broadly. And also I'll try to get to some of those issues too, because they are really public safety issues, even though they're issues really very clearly related to houseless and homelessness. So,
yeah. And Brent, is it possible for me to give you kind of a brief overview of what's going on with budget?
Take a few minutes, say what you want to say.
So, and I first just want to thank the CSOs, Sergeant Nelson and our other community service officers for all their great work, because their program is really the direction of public safety that many of us want to go. So we want to expand the team. There have been discussions about moving the team out of the Seattle Police Department, and we want to do so appropriately. I can tell you, folks, Kevin and Sergeant Nelson, we're not going to be moving you to Department of Neighborhoods. And I have a strong desire that we need to hardwire your team into 911 so that we can relieve sworn officers' time from needing to necessarily refer you. Oftentimes it is important for a sworn officer to join you, but I think that there's just so many opportunities for you to be serving our community that don't require the police as well. And then also to thank Tracy and the Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion team and co-lead. I'm advocating for expanding these services in Ballard, and I think, Angie, to your question about if they should be identifiable by their name tags or et cetera, I think that should be left up to the service providers to decide, as they're the ones doing that work. So I will go through some of the budget items that I've brought forward. I'm going to skip over all of my trees and climate and transportation budget requests, as we're here to talk about public safety. I'll skip over my permitting, statement of legislative intent, and really get into, you know, before people become homeless, they are either, you know, they're oftentimes renters or sometimes even landlords. And so I'm adding money for tenant outreach and education, as well as for the property owner and tenant assistance group at SDCI. So that benefits both landlords and renters. So especially for small landlords who may not know all of the changing rules, this is a great team that is able to provide small landlords the ability to have that information. Food assistance, expanding food assistance, talked about tenant outreach and property owners assistance. We're also increasing homelessness, and I've led the effort to expand the homelessness outreach services. And my proposal in part was working in particular with the BIA. We've shifted gears here a little bit so that we could expand the program across the city. And you may have read with the Clean Cities Initiative, some of those ideas were taken from the ideas that I proposed. So some of the increases that we've been able to do is ensuring that folks that are hired as outreach can also assist with good neighbor agreements. I've also increased the funding for mobile crisis teams. So these are first responders that assist with behavioral health situations. So again, I think we'll be talking a lot about how police officers have been traditionally used as our social workers and our mental health professionals. And the mobile crisis team really is the best suited organization in our city to be assisting with behavioral health issues. So I've not only covered the budget determined cuts that they were anticipating this year, we've also expanded the team to meet the growing needs of the city. As well as I put forward an initiative to hire more mental health professionals to assist the Seattle Police Department with their crisis response units. We may be making a change here in the next 24, 48 hours where we would be using another program that is an outreach for chronically homeless individuals who are having behavioral health or substance use disorders, so that we're able to prevent those 911 calls rather than responding to 911 calls. And that would be on a district by district basis so that we could have someone here in District 6. And then my proviso regarding Harbor Patrol, I know that many of us in District 6 are on the water. However, I think public safety is that we're talking about tonight is not water related, just to say that we want to analyze the data before we make a transfer with Harbor Patrol so that we ensure that the same level of service is provided. So one of the reasons why I did not bring the majority of the public safety and human services amendments to the budget is because I'm the land use and neighborhoods chair. That's why I focused on land use and neighborhoods in my amendments. Other amendments are expanding tiny home villages, increasing basic shelters, services for American Indians and Alaskan Natives, increasing rapid rehousing, increasing the services for families with school-aged children, expanding the use of hotels and motels, and looking into if we can purchase a hotel rather than just rent the room so that we can annuitize the cost over and have a lasting impact, as well as expediting HSD's ability to contract with service providers. So again, for District 6 specific, my amendments will be bringing 2 outreach workers in addition to the 1 outreach worker that we have designated for Ballard. So an additional 2 outreach workers for behavioral health and substance use to District 6. And then 1 person that is specifically designated to work with behavioral health and substance use, as well as increasing the mobile crisis team. But again, I'll end right here with just saying that we know that outreach is only as successful as the resources, adequate shelter, and housing available to our outreach workers. Brent, if you want to jump into questions, I've got a lot more to say, but I'll let you ask some questions.
Well, we'll try and have a conversation, and certainly I'll encourage others who are on the call to feel free to kind of join in kind of as appropriate too. All that sounded really encouraging in terms of really trying to amplify the focus on mental health and substance/mental health intervention and sort of support services, I guess, public health services. But none of it really gets to issues related to any of the kind of criminal side of it or to where things turn kind of more violent. One of the questions, the first one I'm going to sort of provide you with, I guess, is that, earlier this fall, the police chief Diaz abruptly disbanded the community police team because of recent attrition. Specialized police staff are all needed in patrol units, apparently. So we had Officer Mike Cruzan here in the Ballard area, who had developed a lot of relationships with folks of different suits, for both the folks living on the street as well as folks running businesses, folks running organizations, and served as kind of a old school get to know the community kind of officer, but who was also very much a cop and not just a social worker.
Mm-hmm.
So it's concerning that those kinds of folks are going away, and I'm just wondering how is the city council talking about trying to fill that gap, or are we so invested in talking about social and public health services that we're not actually even recognizing that there's still a need for police services, which I think folks across Ballard are really concerned we not abandon?
Yeah, thanks, Brent. And so again, I guess we didn't get a chance to talk about how I approach homelessness and crime, and the fact that when we have people suffering in our streets, as I believe an earlier presenter mentioned, that when people are suffering in the streets, predatory behavior and criminal behavior comes to take advantage of people who are suffering. And the people who are doing the predatory behavior are oftentimes housed, and that predatory behavior then ripples into small business owners. It impacts people who are living homeless. It impacts residents across the city. And so I have been making the call that we need to be able to provide enough adequate shelter to authentically tell people that we have enough space for everyone to come inside. And when we move that suffering off of our streets and bringing people inside to stabilize them, that will decrease the amount of this type of crime that you're talking about. Regarding specifically your question about Chief Diaz making the decision to move everyone into patrol, again, as a council member, I am not in the chain of command of the police department. I do have budgetary oversight. However, I would say that it is a routine function of the police department where they spend as much money as they want, and then they come to the city council and the mayor to ask for extensions upon their budget rather than staying within the confines that the budget has provided. We see this routinely with overtime. Overtime for the Seattle Police Department was used up. Their budget was used up by June as the protests only just began. It's also my understanding that the crime prevention coordinators are still retained within the mayor and the chair's balancing package, as well as Human Services Department is creating a new Safe and Thriving Communities division to coordinate community safety investments. And they're actually currently seeking feedback from residents about the new division and how to seek leadership. And though there are community forums occurring through November 17th. Does that help answer your question, or do you want me to focus in on something?
Well, I think it helps, but I guess the question is then, how have you been pursuing, and do you feel like the council is pursuing kind of trying to put more money into some of these needs that the police have? Are you saying because they're, spending it all on needless overtime that,
wow.
I mean, I'm not sure I really understand kind of how we get to trying to provide more responsive police with the budget and with council political pressure in the context of that answer.
That's really helpful. So again, I'll focus back on the community, the crime prevention coordinators and the safe and thriving communities. So whereas we might not have Officer Cruzan dedicated to our neighborhood, we do have some other opportunities that are emerging. What you talked about right there is something that I continue to pursue, which is allowing police time to be focused on crime. Because right now, 40% of police time is focused on non-criminal calls. 56% of SPD's 911 calls are non-criminal. And when we are requiring our police officers to be our homeless outreach and our behavioral health outreach, we're not allowing them to do traditional police work. So there's a yes, and as well as I'll say that when Chief Diaz made the choice to move people back onto patrol, this has been a policy choice that has been discussed by many police chiefs, so many of the past police chiefs. And so Interim Chief Diaz, this was not a new concept. He's just the first to do it in a long time. And so again, I'll focus back that there are the crime prevention coordinators, Safe and Thriving Communities Division, and they're currently seeking feedback from folks such as yourself about how best to do that. And then again, highlighting the fact that I want to see more police time focused on crime so that we can have the appropriate first responders focusing on the things like behavioral health and social services. Again, at the bottom of all of this, we need to focus on the root causes of these public safety issues, and that is getting people stabilized in adequate and appropriate shelter. We saw the UW survey that Cairo 7 reported on last month that demonstrates, and as well, Tracy's sharing some of her statistics of their clients being served both with substance use treatment, mental health treatment, and housing services. Once you get an individual stabilized, they're more able to access the resources that we have to offer. When people are just trying to survive on the streets and having predators try and prey upon them, they're not as able to think long-term.
Yeah, I appreciate that answer. And I think a lot of Ballard constituents would really strongly agree with you about the need to separate out the mental and sort of health services writ large, if you will. And we're lucky, I think, in a lot of ways to live in such a progressive city where we can get behind that kind of more nuanced approach and maybe start getting it right. I mean, most of the folks I talk to in the BIPOC community, others, they're actively saying to me, look, it's not defund the police, it's get it right police, and so I strongly believe in that. In order to get it right, it's going to be a lot about how we distribute some of this programming and how we assess how it's working. As we kind of talked about a little bit with both the CSO folks, Kevin and his people, as well as Tracy, is like there's a sort of lack of trying to use data and coordination among programs to get to an evaluation of what's working, what's not. And now we're hearing a lot about how it's going to be more of a sort of disseminated, outsourced kind of programmatic approach where instead of having the police do it, we're going to try and find organizations outside of city government to do all this work, which is just going to.
Well, I'll push back. We're not finding new organizations. We're expanding the organizations that we already use.
So we're going to reach out to a bunch of other organizations and sort of further delegate and further employ them to try and implement some of this programming, though, so that we can take it off of the police department's ledger and blotter, I guess, if you will. So sure. I think that's a fine idea as long as we can figure out a way to keep it coordinated and to sort of assess what does and doesn't work. Otherwise, we're going to find ourselves 5 years from now with a lot of folks all pointing the finger like this, saying, well, they do that and I do that. And, and we may be no closer to having less recidivism of some of these things in downtown Ballard.
Stuck in that bureaucratic gridlock again. And
yeah, I was stuck in it still. And, I work, I'd be full disclosure, I work for the city, so I know all about it. But I do everything I can every day to try and slay it. And that's why I'm here on my off time with you. So how are we going to figure out, and how are you working with council to try and really do things that bring hard metrics to some of this stuff and bring it in a really transparent way to us?
Yeah. And so there's a number of different aspects of the Seattle Police Department that are being moved out of the Seattle Police Department so that there can be greater transparency. The data center is one of those places. And what you just focused on really is something that resides in the 911 dispatch. So understanding how 911 dispatches their calls for, right now for the mobile crisis team, who is the best first responder to respond to somebody who's having a behavioral health crisis. So somebody's screaming on the street or having a mental health episode. Right now, the way it works is that we have to call the police. So a police officer has to spend their time going, engaging with somebody having a mental health, behavioral health issue, and then calling the mobile crisis team, who then responds and may take them to the Crisis Solution Center, which is a place where you can get better for up to 3 days, and then extend that in their in the adjacent facility. But I guess what this is when we rely on the police officers to be the first person on scene to every single call, we're not utilizing their time to the highest and best use. So that means that the priorities of government to provide you that public safety that you're looking for at the lowest cost to the taxpayer is not occurring when we're sending a police officer out there first. And that's why I think that the 911 call center being able to dispatch appropriately is really important, and ensuring that we're able to get the appropriate first responder there in the right time so that the police can focus their time on crime.
I absolutely agree. I'm hogging all the time. I have a whole list of questions. I haven't actually really asked you any of them because we've just been having this conversation, but I guess I'm going to invite other colleagues on the district council here to offer a question too. So I'm not just hogging the only minutes with you.
Sure, I would love to jump in with one. One that came in is that it's really common to see people resorting to social media to try and report scary incidents or unsafe things that are happening in the neighborhood. Community members don't really know how to get help in an appropriate way. Not everything feels like a 911 call is going to bring a response. Often it's an hour, 2 hours, who knows when. And so people are just randomly trying to make connections or trying to figure out, what do I do? How do I share information? What kind of framework for neighborhood public safety coordination will be available under some of these new paradigms that are going to need to very quickly come into being as we're losing police officers and things are shifting so quickly? How can people work together at the neighborhood level on public safety?
That's a really great question, Angie. And why don't I follow up with you with a number? So in my office, we've got one of my staff members who returns phone calls daily and helps everyday residents in District 6 navigate some of these questions that you're asking right now. So she's working every day with residents. We were working with 2 residents today. We were working with another group of residents last Tuesday. And so why don't we get you some of those phone numbers so that you can disseminate it to the group more adequately. What I will say is that a lot of the issues that we have dealt with this year is that requirement for police officers to be the referral agency to these social services. So right now we had, this was one of the issues that we were experiencing with co-lead this summer, where the police department was the sole referral agency at a time that they were responding to daily protests. And so they didn't necessarily have that capacity.
Who will be kind of publicly known and accessible to the neighborhood? I don't think it's realistic for people to call your office when someone's walking through Market Street, knocking on vehicles, or if someone's having. So my question is, we don't have a community police team officer anymore. A lot of things are shifting very quickly. What framework will there be for people to reach out and ask for help or compare information other than trying to call your office? It must be something that City Council is talking about in districts across the city.
Absolutely. And so that, again, going back to my answer to Brent just a moment ago, is that number should be 911.
Okay.
The way that we have done traditional first response over the last however many decades, that has led us to a point where 911 has not kept up with our need to change how first responders are responding. And so that's why I offered you in this moment of transition, as 911 is recalibrating, that let's make sure that you have the right phone numbers to call. Because really the answer should be, you should be able to call 911 and the right first responder arrives right in time. At this point, I'm not sure that if calling I don't want to offer mobile crisis teams direct line on this call, because I need to make sure that that's the appropriate thing to do. So there's a number of different agencies and different direct lines that during this transition will be available to you and other Ballardites.
And so after the transition, the idea though is that 911 would still be
exactly
the number to call. Okay.
Yeah, and the problem that we've experienced is just that we've had a framework of how 911 responses or 911 is dispatched in a way that has not necessarily kept up with our emerging needs for behavioral health services, for our emerging needs with homelessness. Yeah.
I have a question, Brent.
Sure.
There is a flyer that's called "Before You Call the Police" and lists alternative professional resources in Seattle, and this is something that's being talked about across Washington State and even nationwide. And I'd like to get a copy of this because I think that this could be something that works very well with reorganizing how 9/11 calls are handled. So I'll get a copy of this to you. It's got some great information and a really thoughtful approach to how to reorganize the whole emergency 911 approach.
And I'll just follow up on that and mention that the North Precinct Advisory Council also sent out an update. They worked with the city attorney's office and other city resources to publish a whole list of city contacts that you can call. But I guess I was trying to more generally ask, how does the public get this information? And as we're trying to, there's so much pushback on, depolicing, taking the focus away from the police, but it's unclear where the leadership and kind of accountability is coming from to tell the public, okay, turn here for information during this new phase. So I just feel like we need to be able to share information with the community. And I don't know.
You can still call 911. You can still use the non-emergency line. It's just that right now we are still requiring police to be the first people on scene. And so you might not get the mobile crisis team as fast as you should be getting them if it's for behavioral health, for instance.
And we're pretty used to, in Ballard, and you live here, we're pretty used to not getting anyone for a long time. So, some kind of improvement there would be appreciated. I guess the last thing I would sort of tag on to what these two just said is, a lot of what you discussed in your really helpful and very detailed budget update newsletter last Friday related to kind of provisos that are going on with some of the budget. And I would certainly urge you and your colleagues to proviso some of the changes in programming and police work that you're talking about with some more kind of reporting requirements and coordination. There's this gigantic lack of connection to the community. We don't know how to really reach out and support the city. The city is not, through its Department of Neighborhoods or its outreach at the police department, coming to our organizations. And so there's this sort of painful vacuum, and it could be eliminated if coordination and communication about some of this programming was a much higher priority of some of the executive side departments who are doing the implementation.
And some of those reporting requirements that we've put in have been a report on priority 1 and I think priority 2 call response times, looking at the 911 call center transitions, looking at parking enforcement, and other data reporting. Yeah, exactly.
Dan, I have a question.
Yeah, John.
One of the things that I have never seen anything about, and it just keeps coming to mind, is what is the true cost of the homelessness for the city, and if we establish what that number is, then we can establish what kind of money we want to spend to be able to help alleviate this problem.
So right now in direct costs, I think the cost is about $150 million per year. What that does not take into account are the secondary costs that are burdened by the city. That also does not take in the tertiary costs that are borne by residents and small businesses through, and my newsletter about this goes deep into all of this. So if anyone who's watching wants a detailed line by line account of how I sum the cost of homelessness to our city, please email me, dan.strauss@seattle.gov, and we'll get you that newsletter. Because what's not being taken into account are that secondary and tertiary costs.
And that's the part that I was concerned about.
Right, because when
that has not been reflected any place.
No, and when you do, then you understand that when you do a direct cost benefit analysis, if you're just looking at, I'll do it like this because my hands aren't that tall. If you're just doing 150 million, but really the cost is, to the city, to residents, to everyone, and that's not even taking in the third bottom line of not having our buses and our libraries and our parks being used as de facto homeless shelters. The cost is here. If you take into those costs, it goes way up here. So if we were to spend $150 million right now, this is where we're at. But if we were to spend $260, $300 million, it would actually balance out, and we'd be able to bring everyone inside into an adequate place that they can live, stabilize. And then we could authentically tell people that they have a place to come inside to, rather than what we're doing right now is where we're relying more on mats on the floor and shelter that is not adequate for people. And that's why people don't want to come inside to them.
So why isn't more of that happening?
Because
we as citizens, we certainly don't have the sense that that's that the agenda of the Seattle City Council is to try and find ways to spend that kind of money to deal with this problem.
Well, that's the that's the interesting thing of having 9 separately elected officials on a legislative body. They don't always all agree. So all I can tell you is my perspective on this, which is that when we are able to bring everyone inside and say, look, we have a place for you to come to. And I think that was an important change that lead and co-lead made this last year, is saying, look, we need to bring people into hotels and motels and still provide them that high intensity case management so that they're able to connect with medical professionals, make sure that they're not continuing to engage in the criminal justice system, especially at a time when the courts and the jails were not operating at their full capacity as they have over the last few years. So I have made these pitches to other people in the city, in City Hall. I've made them for almost a year now. And I think that that's where some of my frustration came to, where I began having them in a more public setting, because, sometimes it can ruffle people's feathers to take conversations that are typically held in private meetings into the public sphere. But at this point, everyone needs to know where I'm standing on this issue, which is that the secondary and tertiary costs are really balancing that direct cost benefit analysis of how much are we spending. Because again, we can spend money on the symptoms of trash cleanup, moving people from place to place, using healthcare, calling in a police officer, calling in a medic, calling in a fire engine just to have them sent to Harborview, just to have, a little bit of work done, and then they're right back to where we come. And we run through that we spin that dial so many times. And that's where a lot of these inefficiencies come from. And the base of this all is that if we get people inside into an adequate place to live, those costs are reduced.
Well, it certainly is the right stride, but we've also kind of already swept through Ballard Commons. Maybe we'll just finish with a discussion of that one place right in the middle of our town. And we're in this position where it's probably more occupied by campers now than it ever had been in the past. Do you have a sense that we're going to be able, assuming that we can kind of get through this current pandemic, to be measurably better a year from now? Can I count on sort of saying, look what we've done, when I have you at a Ballard District Council meeting in the fall of 2021?
I sure hope so, because what we've already seen this last year are different ways of engaging. And as we change how we're doing homelessness outreach, when I can't remember who was leading the cause down on 2nd Avenue Extension in Pioneer Square, initially there were some wrinkles that didn't get ironed out, where we would get people who were living on the street into adequate shelter, but then people would just come back and move almost literally into those same tents.
That's right.
And so what has changed, so then that wrinkle got ironed when they moved into the Chinatown International District with Just Care, where they were actually, the service providers were actually working with the individuals living outside to say, yes, we have a place for you to come inside to, and you have to be part of the solution to clean up the space that you've been living in and ensure that folks don't come in and just repopulate behind you. So I would say that the policies of just moving people around our neighborhood, whether it's moving the person who is living in front of the Nordic Museum into Ballard Commons Park, or moving the people who were in Ballard Commons Park in May to the Leary Triangle and onto 17th Avenue, when we're just moving people around, we're not addressing the solution. We're not addressing the issue. And we're actually making this issue worse, because people know that the worst that's going to happen to them is that they're going to be moved around the neighborhood.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas right now we need to get people to be part of that solution, engage them, so that we understand that that area is not going to be repopulated, and we bring people inside to the services that they need.
Otherwise, we're just playing whack-a-mole.
Yeah.
That's right. And I think just in the first 2 months before COVID hit, I believe that there were 9 or 11 memory right here, all off memory, 9 or 11 encampment removals, all within a half of a mile of Ballard Commons Park. So when COVID hit, what happened was the people who were living in these other places around Ballard all merged into Ballard Commons Park. And we had an opportunity there to really address people's needs in a cohesive way. And the navigation team, when they had the adequate housing and shelter resources available to them, were able to move people inside. Where we failed is that there was 15 or so people who were the hardest to house, and we didn't bring them the solutions that they needed, and instead pushed them into other people's front yards.
And now we're without the navigation team. So.
Well, and we have already set up the next iteration of homelessness outreach within the city of Seattle. And again, back to the point of we aren't starting up new outreach organizations. We're not contracting. We're not creating new contracts with organizations. We are expanding existing contracts so that homelessness outreach can happen quickly and without a lapse. And still having city workers working on the back end of that. But as I said about the navigation team, and as I'll say about these outreach workers and about the outreach workers that I'm bringing to our district, is that they are only as successful as the resources that we provide them.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with the police. When I've done my ride-alongs with the police, when they are tasked with social or behavioral health calls, they don't have the resources that they need. And so then they are even more frustrated because they're just trying to serve the city.
Right. Well, yeah, I think that's very accurate, and I guess we probably need to start wrapping up here, but I guess my one thought is kind of, reflecting on conversations you and I have had in the past, that there are definitely a lot of people who are not going to feel like you've done a good job until there's nobody living on any street sides around anywhere in our neighborhood. And that probably isn't a very fair or realistic metric to hold your 1 year into term council member responsible. But I also would sort of allude to Tracy's point earlier of just really wanting to find a felt difference, one that we kind of anecdotally and just sort of intuitively can feel like we've started to kind of turn things back towards a safer, happier kind of relationship with poverty in our neighborhood.
You nailed it, Brent. And, I live not far from the Ballard Commons. My closest grocery store is the QFC that is next to the Ballard Commons. So this is an experience that I feel every day as well. I have had instances where people have yelled at me, told me that they were going to come and kill my whole family. People that we know who have behavioral health issues in our neighborhood. So I am not immune. And I'm not secluded from these experiences. And I think that that's why you hear from me such urgency with my message.
Well, you've taken up the mantle of elected leadership at an extremely difficult time, Dan, and I'm sure I don't need to tell you that for any seconds. But we do appreciate that that's the situation. And I think, while we're going to continue to be pretty hard on you and demanding as your constituents, we do feel like you're really trying to do the kind of communication and outreach and be responsive in a way that your predecessor wasn't. And so we'll just keep working on this relationship and really I probably, in light of how many folks want your time, beg you to keep coming back to our meetings as often as we can.
As a former Ballard District Council member, I would love to. I love the fact that this has been my 4th time with you this year, since last December, coming and joining you before I was even officially sworn in, and even inviting you all to one of my town halls. I love this relationship, and I really appreciate the hard questions because it's what gets the solid answers out there.
That's right. Yeah. Hard problems take hard answers. So thanks everyone for staying 15 minutes over. I'm usually kind of a whip cracker on making this meeting adhere to its timescape, but it was such a dense meeting full of good thoughts that I thought, since we're all just on TV together anyway, we'll go an extra 15 minutes. Want to say thank you to all the folks in the Ballard community and across District 6 who participated silently by watching us on their YouTube channel. As we do a lot lately on these Zoom distributed meetings, beg you, the community, to think about getting involved. It's mostly just a small handful of us who are keeping this work going as the Ballard Community Organization that is now Ballard District Council. The city's district council, neighborhood district council process was excommunicated by the prior mayor a few years ago. And so a lot of folks are finding it difficult to really find an avenue to network among communities like Ballard. And we're doing our level best, but it would sure be helpful if more folks would get involved. So I will issue that plea and just get a hold of us, info@ballarddistrict.org, president@ballarddistrict.org, any of those kind of things, and we will be right away in touch with you. And you have Councilmember Strauss's and Lead's information to contact them. We're happy to funnel any questions you have for the council, the Lead program, or the wonderfully newly started, again, Community Service Officer program. Going back in the other order, Sergeant Nelson, Ms. Gillespie, Mr. Strauss, thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you, Brent. Thank you, Sergeant
Welcome.
Nelson. Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Bye,
Thanks,
John,
everyone.
Jody, Angie.
See you all. Thank you.
Bye.
Stay safe. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving with your families.
Okay.
Virtually with your families. Everyone needs to wash their hands.
That's right.